This time on PedalBox, we're getting back on the GTO and trying to sort out that InActive Aero motor that seems to be completely seized, thanks to another channel on YouTube who've done this before. This has not gone well. I was pretty certain we'd taken this off, at least partially, but actually the only pieces we took off last time were the metal trim around the edges and the front bracket, which is over there. We didn't remove any of the bolts that held the bottom of this on, to the point where this fell off and is so unbelievably crusty that it's going to have to be replaced entirely. Now, I can't see a part number on it because this is rust across every single inch of it, so that might be a fabrication job. And unfortunately, some of the bolts have actually torn out the InActive Aero, but this is not going well. So I'd hoped we'd just have the motor off by now, we'd be tearing it apart, we could maybe get this whole thing back together and even tested today. But that is definitely not going to be the case, because even if we get the motor apart, working, tested, whatever, this is going to take some love before we get it back on. Well, we're now where I wanted to be about an hour ago. The InActive Aero tray is off. We'll do a bit of an autopsy on that later on and work out how we're going to try and fix it and rebuild stuff. But we're now into the motor, which is what we need to remove. This whole mechanism that runs all the way across the front, take all of these mounts off and then try and dissect the gearbox and everything else to get it apart to see what is jammed up. And we can also put some power in because Chris bought his benchtop power supply, so we can actually run power into the motor and see what it's going to do. Getting this off is going to be a bit of a challenge because there are bolts everywhere, all the way around here. Every bracket is mounted in 2 axes. It's actually unbelievably well attached to the car for quite a small mechanism. So we'll get this off and then start taking it apart. So it looks like we've got 3 bolts, one here, and one buried just down past the motor. The way some of these look, I wasn't confident that was going to come off quite that simply. Hopefully this one, that's not bad. And we've got one more to get that is going to require an extension to get past.
Maybe leave one on that side till we've done the other.
I'm just going to leave this one partially in. Yep, that one came out, but I'm just leaving it in until we get the other one out, and that appears to be all of them. So we'll get the 2 on that side, just the same as these, unplug this and start the dissection. Turns out there's one more bolt right at the back. I shouldn't have been surprised with there being 2 bolts on these 2 small brackets that there will be 2 bolts holding the motor in. So yeah, there's 4 bolts that hold this end in and 2 for the other.
You're on.
So to get into just the motor and gearbox, there is a single bolt, 10mm, on this side, which removes the cam arm actuator. It has a couple of nuts, a couple of washers in there. There is a bushing, which I think I'm going to have to 3D print because that one is definitely broken. Another bushing and an arm, and we get into here, and from there I can get into this bolt that actually holds on to the gearbox. There's 3 bolts that hold this onto the gearbox housing, which I've now released. So here is the motor and gearbox. Motor is on the back, power going in. We assume there is a common in here, 2 micro switches that limit it as it goes round, and these are the 2 cables for forward and reverse. Now we've cheated somewhat because we found a lot of the information about how these generally work from the 3000 GT/GTO restoration channel run by Joe. And we found that and went, this is an unbelievably useful channel, and unfortunately the only thing he hasn't done, because his car didn't have it, is the InActive Aero at the front, but he has gone through the spoiler in the back, which is kind of where we got all of the information to start taking this apart. So with that being said, we should now be able to connect this up and try the motor and see whether or not we get anything out of this output shaft. So we're going to try and power this motor up again. Maybe it's healed in the meantime. Black and red cables are the ones that are coming out. We can find them on the back of this plug up here. They are the middle connector on the top row and the outer connector here. So I'm going to put the black one onto the black connector. So we've got just about 12 volts through here. and if I hold that on, we get nothing. So we're going to have to go a little bit deeper into this motor just to see what's in there. So I'm going to take this cover off the gearbox, take that off as well for the time being, just so we can see if there's anything inside gumming that up. The absolute worst case would be that this motor is completely toast, which would be a little disappointing. But it actually doesn't look too dissimilar from a lot of window motors, which would be really convenient if I could find something that was... That's not necessarily what I expected. So that's the contact switches, which run around on discs through the centre. So you have your common there, and then I'm assuming... No, sorry, common is in the middle. There's a break-in one on this side, and there's a break-in one on the outside. You can just barely kind of make that out, I imagine. I'll use the screwdriver. That looks like the common that goes all the way around, and then there's a trace that goes all the way around the outside here, and a trace that goes around the inside, where it's actually covered in a bit of schmoo, which I'm not sure whether it should be. The contactors in here themselves don't look too bad, so we'll go a bit deeper. So just pop that back on for a second while we get this off. There is a spring clip which holds this in. So now we should be able to take this one back off again. Oh, it is a snug fit, I'll tell you that. I think we found the problem. The gears are actually in pretty good condition. There is an O-ring that goes around the outside. The gears themselves are actually in pretty good condition. There's no like obvious chewing to them, but there is a big old chunk of rust on this side. And when you look inside the main unit, there is a big old chunk of rust on the lead screw. So we're going to have to take this apart yet further so we can check in the motor, see if there's rust in there, clean it all up, and then try and put it all back together. I must confess, I dislike electronics. They always seem to go really badly when I try to do anything with them. Well, I've got a little bit of wiggle room here. However, I've just noticed there is another nut on the end. How many of you were looking at that as I was fighting, going, there's a nut there, there's a nut there, you need to remove the nut. Actually, it's a nut and a bolt on the end. Yeah, now that moves around a little bit more and is actually very slowly coming apart. Oh, that is...
All these bits in that.
So the copper itself actually looks pretty clean. It's definitely not happy about turning necessarily, but it does go. And it's not completely fouled up inside. It's not brilliant. Oh. I think one of the magnets on the outside of this motor has come off. You can see just down the inside edge of the magnet. I can actually get my fingernail quite far down behind between the magnet and here, which means that it will be attracted onto the coil, and that's what's rubbing. Because weirdly, you can hear which side it's rubbing on, and it's this side where that is. The magnet also seems pushed further forward than the one in the other side. Yeah, that's weird. So the center turns fine, but it looks like on one side the magnets are different distances apart. So I wonder whether one of the magnets has... Yep, there is a magnet. And there is a coil, which really is in need of a very, very good clean. Cool, well I think we found the issue. Now just to try and fix it. Cool, stop that there. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, you're on.
So we've got the major components of the motor clean. There's still a couple of bits of rust filings that... Oh yeah.
I can pick it up a bit if you want.
Yeah, it's fine. So the major motor components are clean once again. We've flushed out the inside with a load of brake clean, some rust neutralizer. I've cleaned all of the armature off, so this should be fine now and run smoothly. And I've got as much of the rust as I possibly can off this magnet. Now that's tricky because it's still somewhat magnetic and it keeps holding on, so I keep just finding tiny little bits and pieces everywhere. But we need to affix this back into the housing. Obviously it does hold reasonably well, but we need to actually glue it in place. So we're going to use a little bit of epoxy, glue that back onto the inside, and then try and reassemble the whole thing. So I'm only going to get one chance at this, but I'm going to have to cover this really, really thinly because I don't want to put too much mass behind the magnet. Now the magnet is also obviously holding itself in place somewhat, being magnetic to the outside casing. So I'm not too concerned about that. I just don't want this to be touching the magnet, touching the coil, which is what it was doing before. We can put a little bead of this epoxy around the top, which kind of looks like what we had before as well. But that should be enough on there. Now I need to get this in. Fortunately, there are some marks inside already. I should have guessed that was going to happen, which kind of show how far in we need the magnet to sit. Cool, that is actually, by sheer fluke, almost in exactly the right spot. So this is going to need 5 minutes in order to set, an hour to completely cure, and then we can start reassembling all of these parts. So that's all cured now. We can start reassembling all of the motor. Now we've got to get the two springs back into here and then try and seat the brushes as well. I think that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. Oh yeah, this is terrible. Nope, that's the spring out. That's the other spring out. Cool, one in, but I've now lost the spring inside. There is the spring out. Let's put this one in. Man, I don't know how I'm going to do this. No, don't. Oh, okay, I got one in, and now the other one's come out. And now they both come out. Please hold. So I've now got both brushes in again. I'm going to get Chris to hold one side with a screwdriver so I can let go. So if you take the, yep, that one, and I'm going to hold this one. Right, so they are spread apart. That is in. Seated. Excellent. And now we have motor, which it runs smooth.
Yeah, there's more friction than I expected, but
it's not the end of the world. I'll take that as a win compared to how it was. So now this can go on. Now the seal between these two joins I was a little bit worried about, but it looks pretty good. It's still pliable, so hopefully that should be fine. Now let's see what happens when we power this up. Oh, that moved.
nice.
There was definitely something there.
Yeah.
I wonder if these points are corroded.
Some time later.
Okay, so let's try this again. We've just given the contacts a clean. So this now works. We've packed it full of grease and it spins quite happily on its own. It's drawing about 5 amps while it's running, so a 60-watt motor, given it's got to move a crank with a big aero thing on, seems pretty reasonable. Now we've just got the gear to put in, which Chris has just given a really good cleaning too. We've cleaned up all of the contact plates as well for this. We've replaced the O-ring onto the outside and given that a little bit of grease as well, just to help it seal as it runs down so it doesn't get bound up. This should now go. Doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
Right, let's just pop back inside and see how that grease is spread around, see if we need to add a bit more, since it is only 2 screws and a very quick check. Not terrible. I might throw a little bit more back in because now it has spread around quite a bit. So I've got the washers back inside. We've got the little O-ring on the outside here as well, which then has this little thrust washer on. Oh, only if I get it in the right way round. So that little compression washer, the spring washer there, is what holds that rubber seal in, I think, and stops any water getting in through the shaft down that way. Yep, that's done. Right. Once again, let's see what this does.
It's not connected.
You're right. Seems pretty happy. Now we can reassemble the motor back onto the brackets. That was these 3 bolts here. Next we can put the crank back on, which goes here. Now I'm not going to tighten this up fully because I don't know exactly what position the crank needs to go back into. Probably should have marked that with a pen beforehand, but that would have been much too smart of me. And that's it. That should be the whole motor assembly back together. Great success. So the motor works, the housing is undergoing some restorative care, getting some primer and paint put on it so it shouldn't rust anymore. I've taken the whole mechanism apart, so we're not going to put that rusty mess back on. We're going to clean it all down. I'm going to do the same with the one on this side because this one's also pretty stiff. Now it's off the car, I can get the bolts out, go through that, and we should be onto a winner. Unfortunately, that is not the full extent of the rust. There is a brace which goes between those 2 mounts, which obviously go to the cam across the top, and it sits in this little pocket on the bottom. So you can, well, potentially see there is a little recess here that sits up a little bit proud, and in that recess goes a strip of metal, and it mounts 2 bolts, one, and then 2 bolts at this end. It used to be a piece of metal. It is currently nothing but rust. Every square inch of this, inside and out, is completely rusted through. I'm going to have to try and find what this is to see if another one is available, but I can't find a part number anywhere. I'm not sure if it's even available, if it would just be sold as a new InActive Aero dam, which you cannot buy for love nor money. Both of the mounts at each end, where those bolts go through, are gone. There is just nothing left. This is everything that was on the car when we took it apart. We haven't removed any broken bits. It is this bad. It is really horrendous. And even some of the main body is now just air gaps. So that's not going to be fun. I'm either going to have to remake one of these, which may not end up being quite such a fancy piece of pressed steel. I might just have to use some solid bar with some angle to try and reinforce it. I don't know. I'm going to see what angle, what U-channel profile I can find that is close to this, and then try and rebuild it, if I can't just find another one of these somewhere. And I don't think I'm going to be that lucky. But that is basically what's stopping us from reassembling all of this at this point. I am very pleased that we've got the motor done, we've got the front of the car apart again, so hopefully this should all go back together pretty quickly once that's done. This is now the new priority, to try and get it back together and hopefully have a mobile car on the drive, because it's on the jack stands, on the driveway, and in the way of a bunch of stuff. So the next time you see this car, we'll have all of these parts nice and clean once again and painted and looking lovely. Hopefully have a new piece to install on the bottom, and I'm going to try and clean this up and reinforce the areas with maybe some glass fibre or something. I really don't know yet, just to try and reinforce that section. I know it's flexible and it has to flex somewhat, but around there it is so badly torn up. I just don't know what else I can do, and as I say, you cannot find these anywhere. So thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, let me know what you think in the comments about some of the repairs that we've done and what you would do to try and fix this. You can subscribe to the channel so you'll get notifications when the new episodes go up. You can join us on shop.pedalbox.show, where you can buy t-shirts like this one that I'm actually wearing for a change that isn't a black t-shirt. You can also support us on patreon.com/pedalboxshow, where we have membership tiers which give you extra discount at the shop. So if you do want to buy one of these t-shirts, you can get a bit of discount if you're also a Patreon member. Thanks once again for watching. We will see you on the next episode. I'm sorry there wasn't quite such a superb climax of, oh my god, we got everything back together, but sometimes that happens. But at least we got the motor fixed.